if this is a sign of things to come under Ineos, then it's not so good.
This could be the tournament that happens, obviously, but if it doesn't happen this year, it feels like the bubble's just going to burst.
Welcome back to Monday Vibes, the show where we round up the latest goings on in the world of football from the weekend. Hope you're all doing well. Hope you had a nice weekend. It's pretty gloomy and cold in England for June. Hopefully, not a sign of things to come at Euro 2024, Sam. But yeah, thanks for joining me today, Sam. Doogie was at another wedding actually on the weekend, running theme throughout the last couple of years. But he is on his way back. He'll be back for Sunday Vibes. Sam very kindly stepping in this week. How are you doing?
All good. I think this is appearance number 3, hat-trick of appearances. I was expecting a big hat-trick ball, so I don't know if you're saving that or...
we don't have the budget for it at the moment, unfortunately. Don't have the budget for it, but maybe next time we'll get you on a belated hat-trick match ball. But should we get straight into things, Sam? Because I think we need to speak about the latest out of the England camp. Of course, on Friday, England succumbing to that 1-0 defeat to Iceland. We recorded Sunday Vibes ahead of time, as we usually do towards the end of the week, and I boldly put it out there that I'm backing England to win Euro 2024. I didn't say they were favourites, as some people in the comments said, but a result like that on Friday, and in particular the feeling around the team and from the fans does dampen that optimism a little bit. I'm not, completely pessimistic at this moment in time. One result doesn't change too much. But Sam, I guess what were the main worries for you coming out of this game? Because it was, a poor defeat. It was a poor performance against a pretty poor Iceland team. What were your takeaways?
I think the major thing would be the finishing. I think we created enough chances. I think there was 13 chances we had, but only 1 shot on target, which obviously doesn't bode well going into the Euros against a team like Iceland. I know they're not in the Euros, and we've got to play teams like Serbia, Slovenia. Those are teams that you need to punish, and without sort of getting your chances on target. I mean, Harry Kane started the game, and he missed a good chance. Palmer missed a chance. Foden missed a chance. It's not good. You need to put these chances away, especially in the Euros. When it gets to the latter stages of the competition, if England get there, you need to be taking your chances when they come. There's not going to be 13 chances potentially against like a Portugal or a France. So you need to take the chances. And it would have been great to go into the first game of the Euros with like a 4 or 5-0 win. But instead we were booed off.
Half-time and full-time.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't fill me with confidence really going into that first game, because it seems if we don't start well and we don't score an early goal, is there going to be doubts from the players? I'm sure there'll be doubts from the fans. It's just how we can sort of start this tournament is now going to be really key. We can potentially just forget about this game against Iceland and hopefully go and beat Serbia 4-5-0, but you never know.
You never know. I mean, Serbia certainly are a stronger outfit than Iceland, aren't they? Got more firepower up top in particular. But yeah, I mean, it's a poor way to enter a tournament. I think England haven't lost their final game before a major tournament since 1968. This is the first time since then that's happened, and to add to that, you've got an Iceland team which is not the Iceland team of old. That Iceland team that beat England at Euro 2016, that even gave Argentina a run for their money at the World Cup in 2018. That was an Iceland team that was generally ranked around I think they reached a high of 18th in the world in the FIFA rankings. This Iceland team are ranked 72nd, and of course, they're for England to go into a Euros tournament having been beaten by Iceland as well, who of course did inflict that kind of historic defeat on them in 2016. Again, that's people looking to that as a bad omen as well. There was a lot of anger around the way that the media presented England's defeat, using primarily a picture of Bukayo Saka when he hadn't been on the field that long. He only was brought on for the final 24 minutes of the game. Again, there's that brings more kind of toxicity to the England camp as well. But equally, this isn't the first time that England have entered a tournament in poor form.
Yeah.
The World Cup in 2022, England hadn't won a competitive game for over 12 months when they lined up against Iran in that first game in Qatar. England went on to breeze that group, generally speaking, free scoring up until the quarterfinals. Obviously, they went out in the quarters, but even at Euro 2020, when England made the final and didn't concede a goal up until the semis, that was. There was a bit of a cloud going into that tournament with the Conservative government trying to pit England against the fans in some kind of weird culture war. It was, there's never not kind of weirdness surrounding England,
definitely.
I think, going into a tournament. So I think that's one thing where I think people shouldn't panic so much. But I guess what's worrying for me, you talk about the attack, and for sure England didn't take their chances, and especially in the second half didn't really create an awful lot, especially after bringing on the likes of Trent and Saka. You thought maybe there was going to be something was going to happen there, but the foundations of that team just weren't set enough in that second half. And I think for me the main worry is that kind of defensive unit. John Stones was brought off at half time with a knock to his ankle. Gareth Southgate has said that's precautionary, so as far as we know he will still be fine for that first game against Serbia.
You'd hope so, because the defensive options aren't the best. If Stones doesn't start, then it could be, I imagine it's going to be Marc Guehi, and if Stone doesn't play, it could be obviously Dunk, Gomez. And it just doesn't
potentially.
Konza as well. It just doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence that back two. I think it's strange because Maguire for England's a different beast than he is at Manchester United, obviously. And Stones and Maguire and Pickford, that sort of trio have been there for a while. And you can throw Walker in there as well.
For sure.
But I imagine Luke Shaw's not going to play as well. So you've got Trippier on the left, which isn't his normal position. Then you could potentially have no John Stones, obviously no Maguire. It's going to be a bit up in the air. I think if we were starting against a Denmark, I'd be a bit more worried. But because it's a Serbia, we might be okay. And I feel like we're going to have a lot of the ball. And Walker will probably help us out if they counter-attack. Obviously Rice and whoever plays in midfield, I imagine it's going to be Bellingham. And potentially Trent as well, depending how he's going to go. I mean, based off the 11 players that he's given the 1 to 11 shirts to, it looks like Trent's probably his favourite in midfield, in that midfield three. But whether he goes a bit more attacking against Serbia, I'm not too sure.
It's hard to say, isn't it? But I mean, you talk about Serbia and England's defence. England are going to be up against very physical centre forwards against Serbia, whoever starts in that game. And so I think that back line does need to be pretty settled. I think it's imperative that John Stone starts that first game because Serbia are not to be underestimated. But Marc Guehi also took a blow to the head during the game, but did finish the game, so that was promising. But it does feel like Stones and Guehi probably that first choice centre back pairing. Aaron Ramsdale, of course, played in this game as well. So, I guess we could be buoyed by the fact that Pickford will be in there and that familiarity between him, Walker and Stones.
Bellingham as well. So
no Bellingham in this game.
Played.
He's yet to play, hasn't he? Kind of had that prolonged break after the Champions League final. So there are reasons to be more optimistic in that sense. But then again, was Southgate right to start Kobbie in the final game before the Euros? If, like you say, Trent, it feels like Trent is probably going to be first choice. If Kobbie is the first choice, then I don't think he gave the best account of himself, or at least it doesn't suggest that Kobbie and Rice as a central midfield pairing are the best option necessarily. I think that was always going to be a little bit of a worry with Kobbie. As good as he is, will he be able to play in a double pivot with a slightly more expansive defensive midfielder than someone like, say, Casemiro, someone like Declan Rice who does want to get forward a little bit more as well. Neither of them made a tackle in this entire game, which isn't particularly great. And that, I think, that relationship between the defensive midfield and the centre backs, I think was particularly worrying in the second half, where Iceland were just able to break on England with such ease.
Well, they could have scored a few more goals, Iceland.
Absolutely.
They had the chances. I think there was one where it got squared across the box and he's miskicked it. But if that goes in, it's obviously 2-0, and it's a bit more worrying for England if it's a 2-0 defeat to Iceland.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that was the worst thing about it, is that it could have been worse. Yeah, like you say, Tor Steinsson could have had 2 goals in this game. Ramsdale making a couple of saves as well. Yeah, all in all, it was just a really, really poor showing from England.
I think the worrying thing for me would be, surely the game before your opening game of the Euros, you play as close to your starting 11 as possible, right? You don't give players that maybe need match fitness. That's not the time to do it. You want to go in good form, good momentum, score a few goals, keep a clean sheet. But it seemed like it was just a bit, here's a few players that haven't played recently for England, let's just throw them out and then see what happens. Yeah,
it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because I guess, especially in the attack though, I think to give Cole Palmer more game time again, it's clear that Southgate, even if Cole Palmer doesn't start, as I expect he won't, with Bellingham and Foden and Saka in there, you expect that he will be brought on in the second half of those group games. So I do see his thinking in some ways, but equally it was the kind of culmination of quite a chaotic few days in the England camp as well. Southgate wasn't planning to make his final 26 known to the public until the weekend, until I think it was Saturday, wasn't it? That had to be brought forward because of the leaks, especially over kind of Curtis Jones and was it Curtis Jones and Jared Branthwaite who were the first two? James Maddison, was the first to be
and there was leaks about
revealed.
Maguire was a surprising one, but obviously it seems like that was an injury. The Grealish one as well surprised me. I don't know who, thinking back to it, I was surprised that he's taken Watkins and Toney. I feel like Grealish could give something a bit different, especially for England. I know he's not had a great season for Manchester City, but Grealish for England, again, like with Maguire, I think he performs really well. And at the game at St James's Park, he came on and actually did make a difference. He helped with a few of the goals. So that was a bit of a surprising one, and it seems like there was a bit of an unsettled squad maybe, especially with the news coming out just before the game started. May have affected the morale of the squad, may have affected the way people were going to play that game. Maybe they felt a bit more under pressure to perform, considering such big names have been left out.
And especially to play that game at Wembley as well, I think that's you fed into it as well. I was reading a report of France's final friendly before the Euros, and they played Canada, drew with them 0-0. Kylian Mbappe, amid some kind of fitness concerns, didn't play until the last 15 minutes. And it was generally, obviously a disappointing result, against a Canada side which had lost 4-0 to the Netherlands a few days earlier. But they played that game in Bordeaux, a fan base which haven't actually seen, top flight football for a while, but a very dedicated fan base. And France still received a really good reception from them, and it does beg the question. I think I look back to kind of 2018. I think England's final friendly was down at St Mary's. Is it actually best practice to play, these warm-up games, all of them at Wembley? I know obviously it makes more money for the FA, and this was a sellout at Wembley against Iceland, but the Wembley crowd is more demanding, and if you put in a performance like that they are an unforgiving crowd, having seen England make it all the way to the final in that stadium at the last European Championships.
It does feel with the France one, obviously they've just come off the back of obviously World Cup defeat, but they're on the Euros. They're probably, in my eyes, still the favourites.
For sure.
But with England, it just seems this could be the tournament that happens, obviously. But if it doesn't happen this year, it feels like what's going to happen, the bubble's just going to burst. And I think Southgate probably will leave, which we might touch on a bit later on. But I feel like he probably would leave if we don't win this year. It feels like everything has been built up potentially to this moment. It has felt like that for the last 2 tournaments, but this tournament particularly feels like I can't really look beyond this Euros for England in terms of where we're going to go next.
It certainly feels like there's more expectation for this tournament than any other. Euro 2020, I think, I fancied England in that tournament, but it still felt like, it was the first tournament since 2018 when England really weren't particularly fancied. World Cup 2022, I think all eyes really were on on the kind of Argentina story, and Brazil were very much fancied, despite them eventually disappointing, and France went in as champions as well. Yeah, it does feel like this is the tournament where, even if this squad is less settled than it was 2 years ago, the expectation is really high, and the pure depth that England have, especially in attack, means that, yeah, there's a ton of expectation on them. However, that coupled with what is, the freshest squad we've had in a while, and that's split opinion as well. I think most fans are really happy to have seen the back of someone like Jordan Henderson.
Yeah.
Like Southgate to be, picking players a little bit more on form than he used to. You think of the season that Anthony Gordon's had, the end of the season that Eberechi Eze had. To pick those two over, say, Sterling and Grealish, who have been pretty trusted members of that squad for quite a long time now. Mason Mount's injury problems obviously mean that he's not in this squad. It's a very new squad, and that's where I guess my worries come from a little bit, is that how much chemistry is there actually in this team. The likes of Saka and Foden, who weren't necessarily considered senior players in this side a few years ago, certainly not, are now, really do need to step up. And even someone like Jude Bellingham, who's, yet to turn 21.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of our hopes...
He's a senior player in this side.
Are laying on Jude Bellingham, which is a slight worry. I watched him in Champions League final. He obviously played well, got an assist, but it feels like a difficult player at this point to just pin everything onto him. I don't know if he feels the pressure. Based off his interviews and whatnot, he definitely doesn't feel the pressure. But to pin it on a 19-year-old is quite it's quite scary.
And then you look at the midfield. You've got Adam Wharton and Kobbie Mainoo, who were nowhere near in contention. 6 months ago, Adam Wharton hadn't even played 1 minute of Premier League football 6 months ago, and he's in this squad. And in some ways, I think stylistically, actually, for me, he feels like the most natural partner for Declan Rice, even if Trent is probably a safer bet in many respects. But I think that brings us on to, I guess, the final question before we move on to matters Man United. Who would you pick in your starting 11 against Serbia on Sunday?
Do you want me to? I'm running through the whole 11 here.
Run through the entire 11, yeah.
Okay. I'll start with, obviously, Pickford. I'd go Walker, Stones, hopefully, if he's fit. Marc Guehi, Trippier, because I think Shaw's injured. However, I don't know if even if Shaw was fully fit, I don't know if I would start him.
Maybe, give him an extra few days.
Yeah, I'd feel safer maybe with Trippier there, even though he's not normally a left back. I'd feel like he has played that position before. Then I'd go Rice and Bellingham as a pivot.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. The Chelsea and me really wants to put Cole Palmer in there, but I'm going to avoid that for now.
Oh, I thought that's what you were going to do.
No, I'm so tempted, but I just don't think... I feel like, as you mentioned earlier, him coming on a bit later in the game when there's a bit more space, I think that's where the best of Cole Palmer in England this Euros will come. So I'm going to go Saka on the right, Foden in the middle.
Okay.
And I'm going to take a risk and go Anthony Gordon on the left.
To be fair, he was one of the bright sparks in this Iceland game, and I don't really think he's put. I know he fluffed a shot, but I think generally speaking, his ball carrying and his dribbling ability down the left has been pretty positive ever since he's come into this England side.
He seems like he's an out-and-out winger, really. Yeah. And I think with Saka, who likes to come inside, and Foden, who likes to drift, and I imagine that's where Southgate will want Foden, is in the half spaces and in the pockets. Gordon gives a bit more width. And especially with Trippier coming down that side to cut in, gives him a bit more space to drive out wide and cross into my number 9, which would be I'm joking, Harry Kane. Obviously Harry Kane. So that would be my starting 11. Yeah. What would be yours?
Nice. I like that. I like the Newcastle connection down that left hand side as well. I'm not sure whether that was something you.
No, I've only just thought about that now, but that was great from me.
But that is I do. That's good. That's a bit more punchy than a bit more unconventional than what I was going with. I think I would, obviously Pickford in goal, obviously Kyle Walker and John Stones. Yeah, Marc Guehi, I would go for, and then I don't know. I know he's not played there much for England, but he did a great job for Liverpool at left back this season. I think Joe Gomez runs Trippier really close.
That is a surprising one.
Yeah. I'll stick with Trippier mainly because he has played there a lot more in an England context. He even played at left wing back at points. has that experience as well. But I don't know. I would be tempted by Joe Gomez. I think the defensive solidity he showed at Liverpool at left back this season was really, really promising. And I think this does need to be a defence first back line. I think there's enough attack. Yeah, you know what? I'll go for something different. I'll go Joe Gomez at left back. In midfield, again, I might be a little bit of a maverick here and go with my gut about Adam Wharton and have him alongside Declan Rice. I just think Adam Wharton's passing ability and his ability to sit as well allows Declan Rice a little bit to move. It allows him a little bit more freedom, and I just think Wharton's ability to feed the likes of Foden and Saka and Bellingham could be really, really beneficial. I know we've only seen very limited minutes from him in an England shirt, but
very impressive
for the first game, it might be a risk worth taking. It might be a risk worth taking because I think he every challenge that he's been set so far in his career, he has taken to really, really well. And then that gives you a really, a fresh Trent off the bench if you need something a bit more creative from deep. That Trent's an amazing weapon to have. Maybe that's harsh on Trent not to start him, but I do love Wharton. Conor Gallagher again there if you need someone a bit more combative. But I think Wharton, I'd love to see him given a chance at this tournament. And then the front line a bit more boring from my perspective. Bellingham in the 10, Foden on the left. I know that's not where he's played necessarily his best football this season. Saka on the right, and then Harry Kane up top. But what do you guys reckon at home? Who would you like to see start against Serbia? Do you think this defeat against Iceland puts a downer on England's preparations, or will they be able to put it behind them? Let us know in the comments below. Let's finish off with the latest developments out of Man United, because of course over the weekend reports emerged that Thomas Tuchel has rejected the Red Devils after meeting with Jim Ratcliffe in Monaco last week. According to Fabrizio Romano, he's planning to take a break after what was a difficult spell in charge of Bayern Munich. The likes of Zerbi, Pochettino, even Thomas Frank, and even Gareth Southgate, although that feels unlikely, are said to remain on the table. But Man United are supposedly looking to wrap up their post-season review.
Yeah, a very strange
this week.
Time at Man United, I think. At the
very
moment.
Strange time. I mean, it was it was only last week that they were saying that Ten Hag would find out his fate within days. That hasn't happened. Clearly, there has been delays on the side of Jim Ratcliffe and Dave Brailsford in terms of seeking out a successor and ultimately deciding whether they want to keep Ten Hag or let him go. I mean, Sam, obviously you must be quite happy as a Chelsea fan not to see Tuchel go to a direct rival. But yeah, what do you make of kind of Ineos's conduct, I guess, at the end of the season? Do you think this could potentially be damaging for Man United, next season? I
mean, what is Erik ten Hag thinking during this whole process? I imagine he's obviously spoke to the owners multiple times, but it seems like he was gone before the FA Cup final. You won the FA Cup final, then he was in again, and then they've looked at it again and thought, oh, we haven't progressed maybe that much. Let's try and get Tuchel or maybe Pochettino. It seems like they're just trying to find a manager and just keeping Ten Hag waiting. I feel like if you don't appoint a new manager, what would Ten Hag feel like? Will he feel like he's only got a season left? Would it feel like the inevitable is going to happen next season or during the season where he's going to get sacked? I mean, I don't know where Man United go, really. The obvious choice would probably be Pochettino at the moment, but whether he wants to come straight back in, I mean, he has said he's looking to get back into football as soon as possible, but whether he would go to Man United, I don't know. It seems like the owners just want a fresh face. Similarly to how when Todd Boehly took over at Chelsea, he wanted to get a fresh face in, got rid of Thomas Tuchel, brought Graham Potter in. So it feels like they want a fresh start, but the limited managerial options at the moment for a lot of clubs. I mean, it was a struggle looking at Chelsea's shortlist. I'm happy we've got Enzo Maresca, but I still don't know a lot about him. It seems like the lists of managers at the moment aren't what they used to be. We used to have, I don't know, a Klopp on there, or like a big name that you could definitely see going to that club. It seems like they're just trying to find any manager at the moment that's available. and just keeping Ten Hag waiting and in the dark. I can't see. I could you mentioned that Southgate there, and you don't see it happen. I could actually see Southgate going to Man United. I know Man United fans probably wouldn't be too happy about that, but for me, it seems like the most obvious one. That they're waiting so long. It seems like maybe something has been said after this Euros that he could potentially leave England. I think he's on 95 games in charge at England, so if he does get all the way to the final, it would be over 100 games for England, and would that be a nice way for him to finish and then go back into club management? And it feels like an English manager at Man United under Sir Jim Ratcliffe could be what they're after.
It certainly seems like a kind of cultural thing that makes sense in some ways. Southgate is close with Brailsford, etc. They are friends, and Ineos have kind of conducted themselves in that way before, but it just feels like such a big risk with Southgate. Hasn't been in club management since 2009 when he, his first job with Middlesbrough straight out of retirement.
Wasn't the best.
Had far more downs than ups. He's obviously developed a lot as a coach since then, but the club game has changed so much since then. Can he do it week in, week out? It feels like a huge risk, even bigger a risk than, say, going for someone like Zerbi, who's famously a bit combustible and left Brighton under a little bit of a cloud, a difficult last 6 months there. Pochettino, I think I agree, would probably be the safest pair of hands, and is a manager who the club have sounded out before.
Who would you want? If you would you keep Ten Hag? Or
I think at this point it's. I could totally see your points about. Well, I do feel similarly in terms of how would Ten Hag feel managing next season at United, in the knowledge that a similar review may be around the corner. But in the context of what United have to do this summer, I think in some ways to stick with Ten Hag, especially if there's not a huge amount of money to spend this summer. Of course, United looking to sell Jadon Sancho, looking to sell Mason Greenwood, may well sell more players, may well sell Casemiro if the right offer comes in. If United don't have that much money to spend this summer, then in some ways keeping Ten Hag for another season doesn't hurt the club's progression too much, because there clearly has been some progress under Ten Hag, and they clearly are capable of playing to his system. Even if the second half of last season was pretty dire, there were at least some, a few games, especially in the FA Cup, where you did see what he was trying to do. Bringing Pochettino into the club when, say, there isn't that much scope for the squad, being really properly rejuvenated this summer, I think would be a worry. But if Ineos do have a real plan for a manager like Pochettino, then I would certainly be open to it. But it feels increasingly like at this point the safest bet is to stick with who you know. Erik Ten Hag hasn't been, unanimously popular throughout his time at United, but the fans at this moment are really on his side. The players clearly do play for him when the going gets tough. But the question is whether Ten Hag can sustain good form across a 5-6 game period in the Premier League. That certainly wasn't the case this season, but there are some mitigating factors. It's a really tough one at this point. I think the problem with United right now is that the evidence of the new ownership structure within the club is a lot more chaotic than I think people were initially thinking. Dan Ashworth still on gardening leave at Newcastle. I think that's 4 months now, still not through the door. This post-season review has taken a lot longer than first thought. And I was watching a video, an interview with Dave Brailsford from a couple of years ago, talking about how he is talking about how he's known to his colleagues as someone who takes a long time over decisions. This could be something that rolls on. And you look back to the Glazer era, where decision making was often took longer than it should have, and they still didn't have a situation like this. Mourinho was through the door very quickly after the Van Gaal sacking, or even before the Van Gaal sacking. Ten Hag was through the door, I think, in April 2022, long before the end of Rangnick's tenure. This is the first time that United have entered the summer without a manager. And I think that's probably the most worrying thing, is that, if this is a sign of things to come under Ineos, then it's not so good. I think you do have to give them a chance. This is the first summer. They only, really got their feet under the table midway through this season. But, a decision needs to be made by the end of this week.
It feels like they're quite transparent. I don't know whether it's the media links or whatever, but it feels like every sort of decision is out there for everyone to see and what they're deciding upon. Jim Ratcliffe, I've seen do some interviews. I don't know if they were recent or they were a previous podcast or whatever, but he seems quite vocal and he seems quite open.
He's bullish.
Which is quite different from obviously the Glazers. I don't know if that is harming the situation with Ten Hag quite a bit, and the fact that it's just so out there, and he's going to be questioned immediately. If he stays, he's going to be questioned immediately.
This is the thing. It's put so much pressure on him, and I don't expect he would, but there are managers out there who would potentially resign in a situation like this, when they're being kind of being messed around in this way. I don't think it's the worst idea for United to have sounded out other possible replacements. I think that's just a club doing its due diligence. But when United are so in the public eye, when almost everything gets out to the media, that makes that process that much harder and puts that pressure not only on the ownership but also on Erik ten Hag as well. So I mean that's our take on it. I'm leaning ever more so to keeping Ten Hag at this point. I think Tuchel was really was the outstanding candidate.
Would you have taken Tuchel if he was?
I would have taken Tuchel. I would have taken Tuchel. But even then, he doesn't come without his baggage as well. So it wouldn't have
previous
been
owners.
It wouldn't have been plain sailing. But I think he's a safe pair of hands in many ways, at least in the short term. But that's all we have time for on today's Monday Vibes. Hope you enjoyed. If you want to see more of us, why not check out yesterday's Sunday Vibes, where we gave our predictions for Euro 2024. Thanks as ever, Sam, for joining me.
All good.
The hat-trick ball will be with you next time.
I look forward to
it. We'll try and get that one signed off. But thanks for watching, guys, and we will see you on Sunday.